Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. Now I'm joined with author and the founder of Day One Life Coaching, Mary Beth Schrudder. Mary Beth, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely. Looking forward to this conversation. We're going to talk about a lot of different things, but one of the things we're definitely going to talk about, and my listeners know this, addiction and addiction recovery is something that's near and dear to my heart. Thankfully, I've never had to go through it personally, but I've witnessed it and I know how it can destroy lives. So I love the work that you're doing out there in the world. But before we get started in the conversation, just introduce yourself to the audience. Who is Mary Beth today?
Well, gosh, today I'm a completely different person than I was, 10 years ago. That's for sure. So I am, like you said, the founder of Day One Life Coaching. And I decided to get into coaching because I did turn my life around. And it's kind of like now that I have these cheat codes, I feel like I need to share with the world. I feel like it's mandatory, but I did suffer through a lot of addiction problems that I believe, and I believe with most people, it starts in childhood, especially if you're sensitive. I was a real sensitive soul, always really intuitive. I could always feel other people's feelings. And when you're a kid, that's very confusing because you think they're your own. So I'm a spiritual life coach. So I might say some things that are sound a little bit woo woo, but actually it's all about energy. And like the law of attraction is my favorite thing to teach. And that's like the basic premise of that is just based on energy. It's like the universal law of gravity. Whether you believe in it or not, it's still happening. You don't get to
Right.
decide. So it's like you might as well just learn how to use it intentionally and deliberately because we have so much power over our days than we realize. We have so much more power and we are kind of letting the world beat us around by default, where and learning about the law of attraction. I was first introduced to that in 2006 is that's what's the catalyst of me starting to like get out of my victim roles. Cause I think I was in a lot of, we all go through that. We all do.
Right.
And, like I said, when we were chatting before we started recording, like I don't teach anything that I haven't been through personally. And for me, I went through food addiction, alcohol addiction, and then even toxic relationship addiction because I do feel like I have this addict brain. The brain is different. We handle dopamine differently. Like it's scientifically proven. So we're more likely to get caught up in these things. And when I said it started in childhood, like I grew up in the 70s. And a lot of people who grew up in the 70s, our parents were really kind of hands off. Like things were different back then. And
Yeah, there were no helicopter parents in the 70s. That was not a thing.
it was not a thing. They had to have commercials like, do you know where your kids are? And like we were just out, we were never home. But my parents got divorced when I was 5 years old, which if you look at the psychology books, that's like an extra bad age for some reason for your parents to go through that. And it definitely gave me this generalized anxiety and this abandonment wound, which is where I think a lot of this started because I didn't have the words for it when I was five, but I was like, oh my gosh, if my mom can leave, I mean, if my dad can leave because he's the one who moved out, then my mom can leave too. And I had this generalized anxiety, which, like I was saying, my nervous system was dysregulated, but I didn't know what was going on. I just knew I was always anxious. Every time my mom left the house, I was thought she was going to die. Like I was very aware of how dependent I was on my parents. So that's a
Right.
trauma. People don't realize divorce for a kid is a true trauma. And so that kind of started like all my addictions because it started the relationship one where I kind of became a people pleaser at that point, because I was afraid, like as a kid, Gabor Mate, this is a quote by him. He says, if you feel like you're not wanted, you're going to make sure that you're needed. And I think that's where that people pleasing came in. And when you're a people pleaser, you start to attract manipulators. Like if you're an empath,
Right.
like I was, like they can see you from miles away. Like she's going to be easy to manipulate. And they kind of see it as a weakness, like our kindness is a weakness. And in a way it is. And in a way it is, especially if we're acting like a doormat. And then I learned later, wow, like really I'm a little liar because I'm telling people things that they want to hear because I didn't want any conflict and I didn't want to be abandoned again, so I had this anxious clingy attachment style for a long time. And
Right.
that's not being our true authentic selves, So I'm over all of that, but I would like to tell your listeners, I went from anxious to avoidant because I was in these controlling relationships. So I was like, no one's ever going to control me again, right? And I had all these walls, and now I'm insecure. So we're not stuck in any attachment style. We can get help and get ourselves out of that. So that was the relationship addiction. It's kind of like codependency, trauma bonds. Your bite matches my wound, kind of thing, right? And with food, that was started, of course, before the alcohol, because we do that. What are we doing with addiction? We're just trying to comfort ourselves, self-medicate. We're just seeking relief, which is sad. That's why it's sad that it's criminalized and there's a big stigma, because I think innately we all know we're supposed to feel good and we don't feel good, and
Right.
we're just trying to feel good. And so that self-soothing comes in. So I did that with food from when I was a child. And then I actually had my first drink of alcohol at a very young age. And I mean, which is a huge red flag. But the story with that is I was on vacation with a girlfriend and her family, and they had left all this alcohol on the counter. And my friend and I were like, let's let's try it, like let's mix some stuff together. And we just made these concoctions. And so my first drink was on that vacation. I didn't become a regular drinker at 11, but when I drank, because I didn't have access, or I would have, but when I had that, it was the first time I was like, oh my goodness, I felt such relief. I felt amazing, uninhibited. I always had all this anxiety, and I was like, this is the answer. This is it. This is what I've been looking for. Like I hadn't had a time in my life, because like there was, I mean, my mom had to know I was going through some stuff because of all my anxiety. And every time she left the house, I'd call her all day at work, but there was no therapy. There was nothing like that. So
Right.
I just was like, alcohol, that's the answer. This is my medication. And like I said, I didn't start regularly at 11, but I did start at 14 because I got a boyfriend who was a couple years older, and he always had access to it. And so, yeah, we started drinking a lot, smoking weed. I did, whatever he did. I was very easily influenced as a people pleaser. So we did cocaine, acid, LSD. This is all in my 20s. I'm sorry, teens. This is in my teens. I actually, by my 20s, I had already was mainly only alcohol because I, that was just what I liked the most. And I didn't have good reactions to drugs. I was just, my heart, like I could tell that's not for me, but alcohol seemed to relax me. So that's the one I ended up sticking with for a long, long time.
Right.
And I did have this interesting experience when I was 18. And now I know they call it spiritually transformative experience. And I only heard that term about a year and a half ago for the first time. But I was really, because of all my anxiety, I was really attracted to, I've always been like a spiritual seeker my whole life. I've been able to, like I said earlier, very intuitive, able to feel energies and, paranormal stuff. I've had a paranormal life. We'll just put it that way. But I was afraid of death. I had this fear of death. And so I got
Mm.
really into near death experiences and reading books like that. And I remember when I was 18 is when I read my first near death experience book. And it was kind of like my soul remembered, like, oh yeah, this is how it really is. This is it. Like it was kind of like just remembering instead of just learning something. And it put me into this elevated state for like 2 weeks where I just was able, like this blissful state. It was kind of like having a near death experience, except being in my body,
Right.
where I was just connected with everybody, the blissful stuff, and just the highest levels of joy that you could imagine. And I could just think of a question, and I was like connected to this universal knowledge. I would get the answer immediately downloaded to me as soon as I thought of a question. And this lasted about 2 weeks, and everybody around me thought I was going batshit crazy, to be honest with you. Because I'm trying to explain to people, like, oh my God. And I wanted everybody to feel the way I felt. And in retrospect, I'm like, why did that happen? And I think it was because later on in life, I think it was setting me up, even though I was still in that addiction until my mid 40s, to be honest with you. I'm 50 now. And I only quit drinking alcohol at 45. But I was already teaching law of attraction and all these things. And I was just in denial about alcohol. I really look around and I see everybody else is drinking like I'm drinking. it's very difficult to tell you have a problem when it's something that's so normalized and even
Yeah.
glamorized in our society. So I really was just like, and who do I compare myself to? I'm comparing myself to the people who are drinking as much or more than me. I'm not comparing myself to non-drinkers. So I'm like, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I don't have a problem.
Right.
But back to the spiritually transformative experience, when that happened, I was only 18 and we didn't have the internet. This is like 1992, I think. And so I was like going to bookstores and the libraries and trying to read about what this was. And I saw it did happen to it's actually not uncommon. It happens to people, but people don't like to talk about it because you do seem like you're little Looney Tunes. And I didn't have a guide or anybody to help me integrate that back into my little 18-year-old life. So what it did for me is I got a little bit depressed after I came back down to like this, we'll call it 3D, because I was like in 5D and now I'm in 3D time space reality, just back in this contrast of the world that's, dense and not quite the same as that wonderful frequencies that I was experiencing. And I got a little bit depressed. And that's when I actually started drinking a lot because I felt like this is the only way I can feel connected to people is if I'm drinking at this point because nobody understands me. I didn't have like if I had the internet, I could have found a tribe, right? I could have got right on and found something. But, there's this saying that goes before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Like there you are, there you are. But I did feel like I went from this sort of selfish base consciousness mentality to just complete consciousness, like we're all connected, right? Unity consciousness, we'll call it.
Right.
So I feel like that's the shift that was made, and it was very necessary for the trajectory of my life for where it was going to go. But I think I needed to experience all these addictions in order to be able to teach it. I feel as soon as I heard about life coaching, I knew this is my path. Like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is my calling. I'd never been so passionate about anything as what I do now, actually. So yeah, do you want me to talk about law of attraction a little bit, or what did you want me to talk about from here?
Yeah. So I guess first of all, was there a before we get into the law of attraction, was there a rock bottom moment for you in your addiction?
I feel like
That
I feel like I didn't have rock bottom,
okay.
but I had several really bad experiences. But rock bottom to me, I guess it depends on your definition. That sounds like someone's blowing up their life to me. What's your definition of rock bottom?
I mean, I think rock bottom is a little different for everybody, I mean, I think
Yeah.
when you get to a point where, you feel that you, the only direction you can go from there is up, you know,
I
and
ignored a lot of things. So like in 2008, I got a DUI, driving while intoxicated, and I got arrested. I'm in this little dress on the side of the freeway, taking all these tests. And, I didn't know anything about DUIs. So I blew in the breathalyzer and, of course, immediately arrested because I was driving I live in Cincinnati, from downtown to my house, which is a 30-minute drive. And we had a drink right before we left, and I could actually feel myself like getting more drunk as I was driving. And I was like, oh no, what do I do? Do I pull over? Like, what should as I was having those thoughts, I got pulled over. And we're at this Valentine's Day party and I'm wearing this little red dress. And like, of course I get arrested. It was a bad night. And then I had to do this 3-day getaway. I was also, because of what I blew, I had to take, if you just have a drink, you're really screwed. Like I just finished doing a shot, right? So if it's not good, you're going to blow really high. It's on that thing. So the breathalyzer test. So was ordered to do Alcoholics Anonymous and things like that. But the reason I'm not calling it rock bottom is because I started talking to people about it. And I'm like trying to warn people like, oh my gosh, this was awful. You never want this to happen. And I was afraid I was going to lose my son. He's 21 now, but in 2008, he was like 5. And I'm going through a divorce at the time. So I'm drinking more because of that reason. I always had a reason to drink, right? But yeah, so I was really afraid of all that. But everyone's like, oh my gosh, I've had a DUI, or I've had a DUI, or so and so and so and so. And you start talking to all these people, and it made it seem like, oh, this is just happens to everyone. And no one ever talked about it. And I rationalized it. I justified like, oh, okay, well, I just got to be more careful. And Never got another one, by the way. A lot of people do. They just keep getting continuous ones. And um, there was another time where I fell and I got 13 stitches in my chin because of tequila. There were these little, this is what I say. I had a bunch of little things that should have been like, this is your rock bottom, but I didn't
Right.
take them as those signs. Because that guilt and that shame wears off, right? And that's kind of what, and I did have it for sure, but it always wore off. There was a time, as I was more spiritually evolved in my 40s, and just I definitely, um, oh, I definitely was, gosh, I just learned that I need to be more aware, especially as a life coach. When I became a life coach, I was like, I'm sitting here teaching people how to live their best life. And here I am waking up feeling like shit because I was only going to have 2 glasses of wine and I had the whole bottle or something like that. So it became really important to me to live in integrity, right? Be more authentic. And I was noticing like, I think I'm in denial. I started to get this self-awareness because of all the spiritual work I'm doing. And I knew too much about the law of attraction. But this one day, this was definitely a catalyst. I did the thing where I promised myself I'm only gonna have 2 drinks. And then guess what? I had more, like I think a bottle and a half. And I woke up in the middle of the night. I had a client the next morning and I woke up at like 2 or 3 a.m. and just my heart was racing, my mind's racing. I'm like mad at myself, all that shame, all that guilt, all the things. I'm like trying not to have a panic attack about it. And I had an early client and couldn't cancel. And I was like, well, I had already learned like it's the hair of the dog that bits you. That's the only way to feel better. So 7 a.m., I went to the grocery store as soon as it opened and I bought a bottle of wine and a gift bag. I think I bought 2 bottles of wine and 2 gift bags because I was so embarrassed, right? That I'm there at the grocery store at 7 a.m. And, I felt like I had developed too much and had too much self awareness to be doing this, pulling this crap at this point in my 40s, right? Like, what am I doing? But I did, it calmed me down. I did drink some wine before my appointment. It calmed me down. And that was when I was like, this has to stop. So that was a pretty big catalyst because you would think the DUI would have been worse, right?
Right.
But I didn't have enough self awareness at that time. I was still in denial, and denial is the weirdest phenomenon. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah.
Like I was in that for a long time. Um, there's also there's a phenomenon called the fading effect bias, the FAB, which is, like I said, a psychological phenomenon where as time goes by, and this works for relationships and food addiction and any addiction, we start to only remember the good parts of it. We get like nostalgia, we start to reminisce like, oh, that was really good. And oh, it's a sunny day. And it's so fun to sit outside a Mexican restaurant and have a margarita and salsa and chips, right? Like we start to think that and forget all the negative associations.
Right.
That's how we also get back into toxic relationships, the fading effect bias, because we forget the reasons why we got rid of that addiction. We got rid of that relationship. It fades away. So that's another thing that kept happening to me, I think, that kept me in that cycle. But I did have another like spiritual transformation where I just had this energetic shift from doing all the spiritual work. This is why I like to teach it, where I felt this energetic shift, like a paradigm shift completely. And in that moment, when I was like about to turn 45, I knew that I knew that I knew that I knew I was done. It was the first time I said it and I knew I was never going to go back to it. I was like never going to have another drink. And there was like any other time I didn't trust myself because, we lie to ourselves. But
Oh
this
yeah.
time, because of this energetic shift that happens when you do the spiritual recovery work, I knew and I've never once been tempted. And that's why it's so important to me to teach people because we're always trying to fill a void with addictions. We're trying to fill a void. So we fill it with other things and healthy things and spiritual things is what I needed. And now I just don't have that void that I need to fill anymore in self-love and self-worth. And I had been doing all this work and it was kind of like slowly, slowly, slowly changing me. And then all at once. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So, it almost seems like you just got to a point where you felt with the coaching that you were kind of, living this double life or living a lie to your clients
Mhm.
and decided like you had to take a step to be authentic. to,
As
to
soon as I
really do that?
realized it, it's like I no longer had inner peace with it. Like, but before that, I was coaching for 2 years, not feeling any guilt or shame because I wasn't feeling, I was in denial.
Right.
It's so
Right.
weird. And then I added on an addiction recovery niche, is what happened. I added that on to my coaching. And then I read this book called Alcohol Explained. And oh boy, did that change my life. If anyone's thinking about quitting, read that book because you cannot unlearn this stuff. Like I knew alcohol was bad for me, right? Like I knew it was bad for our liver, but I didn't know it was a group 1 carcinogen, which means it causes cancer and it's linked to 7 different types of cancer.
Right.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that it was affecting my sleep so much. I was blaming everything on my hormones. I was just like, oh, it's my hormones. That's why I can't sleep. But alcohol is a depressant, and our bodies are doing the natural thing by creating stimulants to counteract that depressant. So that's what I learned from this book too. It's like, well, we're sitting here, the depressant wears off like 4 or 5 hours maybe after our last drink, and that translated about 2 or 3 a.m. for me. 3 a.m. in the morning, we're up, we're wide awake because all we have left is those stimulants because the depressant of the alcohol wore off, and that's why we're awake in the middle of the night. And that didn't used to happen to me until my 40s. It is progressive, and our bodies can only take so much abuse, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so learning that was huge. I mean, it kind of reminds me of because I was even able to tell myself alcohol is good for me. It's good because, doctors are like, drink some red, because that's what's my thing. Red wine was that was my jam, right? Red wine. And I'm like, well, it's good for you. It's got this, these ingredients that are good for your heart and anti-aging, but that's only true at very, very small amounts, right?
Right.
But we
Right.
lie to ourselves, and even doctors were recommending it. It reminds me of back in like the 1930s or the 1950s, where doctors used to, well, tobacco companies used to pay doctors to prescribe cigarettes,
Yeah.
or at least recommend cigarettes, right? And they would do that. And it kind of feels like that's kind of a scam that's going on with alcohol these days with me, because you don't see the stuff on the warnings about it being carcinogenic. You don't
Right.
see that. And so I didn't know that. And I was always doing stuff like, well, I'll just take these supplements. Yeah, I'll just take these supplements like to cancel out the like, because I knew it depleted our body of nutrients, which it really does. Alcohol does. So, and then I knew it was bad for your liver. So I would take milk thistle, B vitamins, all the things that I thought was canceling it out.
Right.
But and honestly, I was feeling like shit. And like I said, I was blaming other things. But once I really read that book and started doing the addiction recovery certifications, there was no more denying it. And I could not do it because I am like a person who likes to live in integrity, like you said.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So how did the law of attraction play, what role did that play in your recovery process?
Well, like learning about I already knew about the law of attraction since like 2006, but once I had that wake up call that, oh my gosh, you are abusing alcohol. Like, by the way, I want to throw this in here. I don't ever say I am an alcoholic. I don't say that because, and I don't go to AA. When I was ordered to go, and this is just for me, I do feel like anyone, if you have a tool that works for you, if AA works for you, or a family member or a friend, everyone should keep that tool. So I'm not saying anything negative about AA. I'm just saying for me personally, that wasn't a good path for me because it was a contradictory to my spiritual beliefs, which when we say I am, that's the most powerful words. We are in creator mode. So this goes along with law of attraction. So saying I am, and you fill in that blank, make it something really good, make it something you want to keep recreating because you're in creator mode. So I couldn't sit in there and tell an old story, stay in an old vibration. I knew enough about law of attraction that once I was aware I had this addiction, I had to shift my identity completely. Like I'm simply no longer that person who goes and has red wine for lunch, with her friends. I'm no longer that person who's going to go to the grocery store at 7 a.m. with a gift bag and, do all that stuff. And like every time I went out to dinner, I would get wine. Like there was not one time that I didn't, so I just had to shut the windows, lock the doors. That's no longer an option.
Right.
Boom. 100% commitment. And with the law of attraction, you know, alcohol is a lower vibrational substance. It really is. And I feel like the more I raised my vibration, the more it became not a vibrational match. And I started to get all these symptoms and problems that I didn't have before. And like, it's almost like alcohol was leaving me because I started to love my life. I was out of the corporate world and I'm coaching and I'm being more passionate. So I naturally started drinking less just because of that. And that's a huge thing. You guys, like, you got to find something you're really passionate about. It's when you love your life, you're less likely to try to numb yourself out.
Right.
And that's another important thing to say is Brene Brown says we cannot selectively numb our feelings. It's not selective. We're numbing all of them, the joy, the happiness too.
Right.
We're not only numbing the bad stuff. So that's something I want to say is, so it's been a little over 5 years since I've had alcohol. I am so much more able to feel these high frequencies of joy than I thought I was. And I was able to I feel some of them, but it's like, it's a 180. It's night and day, the way my life is. I'm able to create better. I attract better clients, and like before I was attracting more like non-committed clients because I was kind of non-committed, right? It makes
Right.
sense, like attracts like. But with the law of attraction, just everything is energy. Everything vibrates. It just vibrates at different rates, right? So denser things are going to vibrate at a slower rate. And I learned a lot of stuff on these law of attraction expansion courses that I took because I used to think, well, we always attract what we are. And it turns out that's not true. We attract things for many, 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 many reasons. And a lot of these reasons are subconscious and we're not even aware of it. Like the relationships, like I was playing out stuff from childhood, that abandonment wound over and over. And something would be like, my dad was emotionally absent. So who do I seek out? You know, guys who are emotionally absent and or manipulative or things like that. So it was just repeating patterns. And so the way to change that is bringing that subconscious stuff to the surface, which is doing a lot of shadow work and not pushing down your feelings. I'm not a positive vibes only girl. Even though I teach law of attraction, I see our feelings as indicators, guidance. Do not shove them down. They still live in your body, and then they're going to come out later as triggers, right? You are pushing them down and they are not going anywhere but in your body. So like you'll be in like an argument later and you'll get triggered really easy by something on social media. And these triggers are good. They're good indicators. Don't be mad at yourself. They're showing you a place where something still has power over you in some way. And that's good. You want to know that, right? It brings it to the surface. So
Right.
I love it when I get triggered. Oh, something else I get to heal. You got to analyze it and kind of see like, why did I get so triggered by that? But the basic law of attraction thing, the formula, the very, very basic is ask plus believe equals receive. Basic formula. But we get so caught up. Asking's easy. Like we know what we want and we really know what we want when we have what we don't want. The contrast, right? That's how we
Right.
learn. So you date someone who's maybe not so great for you. And then you're like, okay, now I know what I want more. It gives you clarity. So asking's easy and receiving is just being relaxed, but the believe part is where we all get stuck because we have all these limiting beliefs and we have all these subconscious patterns that we're usually not aware of, and that's where the work is it, and we the good news is we can change this. And I had a lot of limiting beliefs. I had a lot of limiting beliefs just before I quit alcohol. Like I'm not going to have any fun. My friends are all going to leave me, like I'm not going to have any friends anymore. And you know what? That happens. That happened. I did lose some friends, but did I really lose friends
Exactly.
or did I lose
Exactly.
party people?
Yeah, exactly.
So that, and then with we all have a different point of attraction. So it makes people think, oh, the law of attraction doesn't work for me, but it works for somebody else. It always works for you. It's just that the point of attraction is three parts. All of our programming and our beliefs from childhood. So that's a lot, right? And the older you get, the more of that you have built up. So that's point one of your point of attraction. Part two is going to be your momentum on a certain subject. So you're going to have different momentums on different areas of your life, relationships, money, health, addictions, whatever it might be. You're going to have different momentums going on each one. So that makes it even more complicated. And then part three is going to be how do you feel, how you vibrating today on each subject? How do you feel right now? So it's very, very complicated. And there is a lot of work and it's all about making that subconscious stuff, bringing it to the surface, because most of us honestly are living on autopilot, doing the
Yeah.
same thing from the day before, thinking the same thoughts, taking the same actions. And then we wonder why our life's not changing.
Right.
Well, that's why our life's not changing because we're not doing anything different. So it's really about going out of your way to catch these patterns, be mindful, waking up in the mornings and being like, what can I do today to what can I make happen? Basically, like, how can I change things? Because you shouldn't be waking up miserable. Like, I used to wake up miserable when I worked in the corporate world because I hated my job. And that's when alcohol became like my reward. It was my reward. I deserved it, right? Like, I was looking at it that way. Like, this is what I deserve. And it's because, so find things you're passionate about, and replace, you always got to replace those other habits with something healthy. Like, I became a gym rat for a while because I was like, I needed something to do during happy hour and I wasn't into AA, like I said. So I started to go to the gym a lot, and that worked for me. And it does all these wonderful things to your brain chemistry too. Right. So that was a good, but that's not going to work for everybody. Everybody needs to find their own personal thing that's going to raise your vibration. And a lot of the spiritual recovery work, the more we raise our vibration, like I said earlier, we start to, we don't have this huge void to fill anymore. We don't want to numb out. We start to enjoy our life. We're being more passionate. We got to lighten up. Like, a lot of us, I think, we just forget. We're, like, think about when we were kids, we didn't need alcohol. Alcohol kind of kidnapped us. It's like we feel this need, like we have to have this, but it's in us still to be able to have fun without alcohol. It's just we forgot, and we got to practice. I had to practice because I was so used to drinking every day. I drank every day. There was always a happy hour, right? There's always a reason to drink, and it got progressive and progressive. And, I would go to happy hour. Next thing you know, I'm stopping at the grocery store on the way home to get another bottle of wine, have some more by myself at home. So, it gets out of control. But back to the law of attraction stuff. I'm going to go into like relationship addiction, because what I learned was I kept attracting the same. I'm like, I've done all this work on myself, but I'm still attracting narcissists, liars, manipulators, cheaters. What in the hell is going on? Because I know I'm not that. I'm the opposite of that. Like, I tell the truth too much. um, and I do think I live in integrity. I know I do. And I was like, what is up with this? Because it's making me question the law of attraction. Because if we only attract what we are, why do I keep attracting this? And then I
Right.
found out that we don't only attract what we are, we also attract anything that we judge. And this was life changing for me because I had been in those relationships. I judged people who were manipulators, liars, cheaters. I still had an energetic spark. Essentially, we're going to attract anything that we have an energetic spark with, whether that's good or bad. So we really need to pay attention to that. Like, it doesn't mean that's what you are, but you might have opinions, be
Right.
really judgmental. It could be some opinions with politics. It could be, you're going to start seeing more. If you start judging something, just expect to see it in your life a lot, essentially, because we're attracting it. That doesn't mean that's what we are, but we've got that energetic spark that we got to take care of. And I had to go through a journey of forgiveness and compassion for these people who I considered, myself a victim of. I don't anymore. Now I'm able to take accountability for the role that I played. That you're not in a relationship by yourself.
Right.
Takes two
Right.
people. So, like, I had to go through that journey, and also with just looking at them like this, like, they were once babies with a clean slate, these manipulators and cheaters and liars. And essentially something happened to them in life to make them feel like they need to lie, cheat, and steal to get somebody to love them. And when I really took a look at the history of these guys, I was like, this makes sense. And was able to look at it with compassion instead of judgment for the first time. So that's how you get to that healing journey. And it's not overnight. I made it sound like it was. It's not. It takes a minute, but you have to get there. And then I no longer attract that type of person anymore. And so that's really what it was. Is I was still had that energetic spark, and even so, like, it's not that I never attract anything negative. That's a huge misconception with law of attraction. Is if you high vibe, you're nothing bad's ever going to happen, because we can only control our own vibration. We
Right.
can't control anything outside of that. So you're still going to have, you're going to lose a job now and then. Your pets are going to die. Your parents are going to die. Like, there's just stuff that happens in life that is out of our control. All we can control is our own vibration and our reaction to what happened. So our relationship to the contrast, which is contrast is what I call undesirable things that happen. That's what changes. Our relationship to that contrast changes. And you still want to feel your feelings and go through um, you know, the grieving, whatever happened. If you have to grieve, you have to do that, right? But you do tend to get through it faster once you really understand. And like with me, I've had so many paranormal experiences. I know there's no death. So like when my mom died a few years ago, number one, I was so glad that I was sober, like for that and being able to be present. And for my child, I'm so happy that I'm able to be present for him now. I drank up until he was 16. So, but to be honest, part of my problem was I was kind of a fun drinker. I wasn't like the angry type, which made it even harder to
Right.
tell because my son kind of would like take advantage of that. Oh, she's a lot more generous when she drinks, and we'll get go here to eat and go do this, and she can buy me this. So he took advantage of that. But that did make it harder because I didn't really have a bunch of people mad at me all the time. They wanted to party with me.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. So, I mean, is there anything that we've talked about a lot of different stuff, but is there anything that we missed that you think would be important for the listeners before we start to wrap things up?
Gosh, I really think just it's never ever too late to change, no
That's
matter
that's
how
a
old you
big,
are.
big point. That's a big,
Yeah.
big point.
Yeah. And because a lot of people, they're like, oh, I'm too old for that. And all I can say, like, oh, I wish I got sober sooner because of how much my life improved on every level. I'm a holistic coach, mind, body, spirit. It's got to be mind, body, spirit, because if you have one of them out of balance, you're just out of balance.
Right.
So just really, as long as you get to that point where you want to change, you can change anything. You just got it, but it does require commitment. Motivation doesn't work because but you can be motivated, but it's temporary. It's temporary for me too. Like when I work out, like I don't always feel motivated to work out. I have to rely on commitment and discipline,
Right.
right? And then with this vibrational stuff, with the law of attraction stuff, it's daily stuff. Like it's daily work. I set myself up every day for success. I know what I need to do, and it's important for your listeners to learn what they need to do to have the best day possible and do those things. Have a nighttime routine, have a morning routine, put yourself to bed. I used to never put myself to bed. My son said it one time, why don't you put yourself to bed, you're always so tired. And I'm like, why don't I? From the mouths of babes. But yeah, so it's just really just, this is daily work. Just like you don't get to go to the gym, I finally hit my goals, my fitness goals, I'm done. No, you have to keep doing stuff. You have to keep eating properly, you have to keep going to the gym, or that body is going to go away. It's the same with your vibration. You have to do things every day to raise your vibration. And I'm telling you, that's what worked for me. Is a lot of these addictions, once you learn how to do this and you do the spiritual recovery work, like it's no longer a craving or a temptation. Where I feel like with people I know in AA, they're white knuckling it. It's called being a dry drunk. They still have these cravings and temptations because they didn't really fill this void. They didn't have that energetic shift. They're still talking and every day about their old identity and listening to other people in these groups discussing the old identity. And it's how do you shift? That's why it didn't work for me. Like for me, I talk about it in podcasts or to my clients, but it's in a totally different way. It's like, how do we change this? We present, future. We're not talking about the past like that.
Right. 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 So, Mary Beth, how do people find you on the internet if they want to reach out, find out more about what you're doing, find out more about your coaching or get your book, all that sort of stuff? How do they find you?
Yeah, I'm on every platform. YouTube, I have a spiritual transformation podcast with Mary Beth. I've got some interviews on there that people might like. If you're spiritual, you'll like them. I interview a lot of spiritual healers. And then um, I'm on Facebook, 2 pages. Mary Beth Schrudder is my personal, but I also have Day One Life Coaching, Day One Life Coaching on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. I'm on LinkedIn, all of those. But if you would like to check out my website, day1lifecoaching.com, I actually offer, it's DAYONE, lifecoaching.com. Um, I offer a free discovery call, which is just basically a 20-minute Zoom call with me where you tell me a little bit about your background, some goals you want to reach, where you feel stuck in life, whatever it might be, if anything I said resonated with you. And I tell you a little bit how I work. We decide if we're a match to work together. If not, I should be able to guide you to someone else where or a program even, that might be a better match for you. Because I'm definitely not a match for everybody, and I will let you know. It's not
Right.
bad. It's not a bad thing. It's
It's just the way it is.
we're not a match for everybody. That's how it is.
Yep.
And I would like to offer your listeners, actually, I will put coupon code Journey in honor of your podcast, Journey. for my addiction recovery with the law of attraction cards. And that's just a deck that I created after I got sober. And it's a deck of 44 cards. And they both teach law of attraction. And also, you pick a card every day and you follow the instructions. And it's all about addiction and the recovery methods that I use to get sober and from detox my life from everything, really: food, bad relationships, and alcohol.
I love it. I love it. I'll definitely put that in the show notes as well, so people just kind of click on it and follow the steps from there. So, Mary Beth, that brings us to our final question. As you know, the subtitle of the podcast is "Many Little People in Many Little Places," which comes from the opening lyrics of the Michael Franti song "Gloria," which go, "When many little people in many little places do many little things, and the whole world changes." So, what's one of the little things that Mary Beth does on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place?
Well, when I had that spiritually transformative experience when I was 18, ever since then, like I just knew how much every little thing that we do matters so much. Even these little things that we don't think matter has a huge ripple effect. So since then, I've known that. And I've always, just, I will do whatever I can to smile at people, compliment people, but sincerely, like I don't just do it.
Right.
Yeah, but I will do things like that. Anytime I go to a restaurant, I'll tip extra because I've been a waitress and I know how it is and how much they depend on it. And then I know, like, man, when they get this nice tip, they're going to be kinder to someone. It's going to make them
Right.
happy. And then that person's going to be kinder. And that person, it's just this huge ripple effect. So little things like that, anytime you're out in public, just any little thing you can do, it just causes this huge ripple effect that I wish we could see, but we can't. But we'll be able to see them in our life reviews after. From what I know about near-death experiences, we will be able to see them eventually. But I just love doing stuff like that and knowing I'm causing a huge ripple effect, even if it's just smiling at someone.
I love it. I love it. Mary Beth, this is a great conversation. For everybody out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com. While there, check out my Pay It Forward program where you can purchase one of my books, and Sandy and I will donate it to someone along our travels. And again, Mary Beth, it's a great conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today.
Thanks for having me.
You bet.